Greetings, my name's Guy Dauncey. This is the show Change the World, where I like to explore some of the big issues we're facing on the planet, and especially the solutions to those issues. And I like to invite guests on who are dealing with positive approach to how we tackle some of these problems. Today we're going to talk about forestry on Vancouver Island, and really throughout the province. And just to give it a bit of context to this, before we white folks arrived here, if you were living on the island with a First Nations clan or tribe and you wanted to cut down a big cedar tree, you need a week's worth of work for a whole crew of you. Today, with a chainsaw, it can be done in half an hour. So that's the context. My guest is Ken Wu. Welcome, Ken, to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
To give you a bit of introduction, Ken is the co-founder and executive director of the Ancient Forest Alliance, a non-profit environmental group working to protect old-growth forests in BC and to ensure a sustainable second-growth forest industry. He previously worked as executive director and campaign director for the Wilderness Committee chapter in Victoria, graduated from UBC's ecological science program, and worked as a tree planter and a flying squirrel biologist. So you're either a flying squirrel of biologist or a squirrel biologist with flying. Yeah, that's fun. 26 years working to protect BC's old-growth forests. That's fun, ever since you're a teenager. So what's inspiring you today about the state of our forests on the island?
Oh, well, I think the forests themselves are inspiring. So
Yeah.
I like what you mentioned, that it's important to focus on solutions and on a positive approach as a whole. We do have to talk about the clear cutting, but I mainly focus on how awesome these ancient forests are.
Yeah.
So that's what inspires me. You know, these are the biggest and oldest living creatures, not only now, but that have ever existed in the planet's history, giant ancient trees.
That's a lot to get the brain around. The oldest, biggest living creatures ever existed. And they're right here on Vancouver Island.
Yeah, like here, second only to the redwoods of California, we've got the grandest forests on Earth.
Wow.
So they themselves are like, you know, cathedrals, and I'm always inspired by them. I never get tired of big trees.
So we'll just go straight into some of the photos you've given me, starting with the overall image of old-growth forest, or the forest in, I believe, the Walbran?
Okay, yes. The Walbran Valley is ground zero for the ancient forest campaign.
So this is an aerial view, and from a sky above it, just like, oh, bunch of trees.
Yeah.
But you dig in, and my goodness.
Yes, so this is the San Juan spruce. It's actually near the Walbran, but it's not right in the Walbran. But it shows you the kind of ancient trees, the biggest living creatures that have ever existed on Earth.
I mean, that's an adult, a younger woman there?
Oh yeah, that's an adult.
But you need like 30 of her to get her hands around that tree.
It's a crazy big tree. Like it's probably 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
And not only is the tree massive, but if you look at the top left side, that's probably the biggest mushroom in Canada, by the way, and the oldest mushroom. That's an agaricon mushroom.
Incredible. Let's move on through some of these images and then get back to like, whoa.
Okay, so that's Canada's gnarliest tree. It's the one of the biggest burls that have ever existed. It's only can exist on an ancient tree like this. And, this is the Avatar Grove.
What causes a burl like that?
So the original theory was that it was like a non-cancerous growth caused by viruses or fungi.
Yeah.
Now the belief is it's sort of like, it's called a lignotuber. It essentially stores apical meristem cells that help regenerate the tree if it's damaged.
Okay, let's roll on.
This is Canada's, the world's largest Douglas fir tree, the very biggest Douglas fir on Earth near Port Renfrew.
How old would you say it is?
Over 1,000 years old. It's 14 feet wide. It's over 200 feet tall. It's one of the biggest vegetables in the country.
So when Europe was deep in the Dark Ages, this tree was just beginning its life, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Amazing. Let's go on here.
Okay, so this is the Fortress Giant. It's we just recently identified an amazing grove not too far from Jordan River.
Yeah.
So just like an hour and a half from Victoria, we've got this incredible stand. We called it Jurassic Grove.
Yeah.
It's right by the Juan de Fuca Park. So one day maybe it'll become Jurassic Park if they save it.
Wow.
Names.
And another one similar.
Yeah, so like this is an ancient, it's called the Emerald Giant. Originally I called it the Mordor tree, like Mordor from Lord of the Rings.
Yes, yeah.
It's in the Walbran Valley, and it shows you the complex structures that form in the ancient forest. You just need a lot of time for trees to form those.
Is that a fir or a cedar?
Oh, that's a Western Red Cedar.
Western red cedar, wow. And then we have maples, right?
Yeah, so you know what, the BC's got the biggest maple on Earth, and they can be 400 years old, and from top to bottom, even down to the little branches, they're covered in mosses and ferns in many of these locations. Mossiest trees in the country. And
the maples are just, they're such a beautiful, they're a brother-sister relationship to the firs and the cedars because they're all so blossomy and feminine. And, and then we have another
Okay, so it just shows you the risk here. So this is the Avatar Grove near Port Renfrew in 2010 when we came across this grove, and it was all marked for logging. And so we ran a major campaign with the business community. We can talk about that a bit more later. And we ended up convincing the province 2 years later to finally protect it.
Wow, yeah. And
because there's thousands of people going to see the area, we built a boardwalk to protect the tree roots in the Avatar Grove.
Yeah.
So now it's become like a second cathedral grove, and it's like the Cathedral Grove of Port Renfrew, and we just finished the boardwalk just a couple of months ago.
Right. And next we have yourself. My goodness, it's just size of this incredible.
Crazy trees, eh? So
crazy
this one's
trees.
a Tolkien giant in the central Walbrand Valley, also an unprotected region.
This is Doug fir, I think.
Red cedar.
Red cedar again, right?
Crazy red cedar.
Just incredible. What's the maximum age this will live before it finally topples? Over 1,000 years, you said?
Oh, I'll bet you. So yellow cedars, they know about 2,000 years. The red cedars, probably similar, except that they're always hollow in the middle. Once it gets a certain size, they hollow out.
Yeah, incredible. This gives a bit of context.
So this is Big Lonely Doug, and it's the second biggest Douglas fir in Canada, which we just came across it in 2014. And he's lonely. This Douglas fir is a lonely Doug because all the trees around him were clear cut in 2012.
Yeah, because that's the reminder. I mean, how vulnerable is that to a wind blow down now? You know. Yeah,
the lower branches, even if some of the lower branches were ripped off in a winter storm when we came across.
And then the second to last photo, I think.
Yeah, so there's a huge, this was the finest grove of ancient cedars that we've ever come across, except it was cut and we just missed it by a couple months. In 2010, near Port Renfrew, we came across a grove that would have included dozens of 14 to 16 foot wide cedars cut down. We just missed it, and there's no equivalent that we know of living in that region now.
I've seen photos or artist images from the 1880s or so of trees like this with people on top celebrating and dancing to say how great we are that we've cut this massive beast down. Like they thought it was glorious. It must have been the era when, you know, humans conquering nature was just seen as an amazing thing to do.
Yeah, killing grizzlies and whales and giant trees.
It's just crazy. So then, this is the final image. Talk me about what's happening here.
Yeah, so the main thing that we focus on is it's building a large-scale, broad-based, engaged movement of citizens. An educated citizenry and an active citizenry exerts the ultimate lobby pressure on government. Now, I've evolved, so we're not just only targeting our own echo chamber of environmentalists, we're going broader beyond that. But people count. And
so when I first arrived in Victoria in 1990, the campaigning was about the Carmanah and Clayoquot Sound. No one knew much about the Walbrand. Certainly no one knew much about the Port Renfrew area, but the trees were all there still. It's your work with the Ancient Forest Alliance that's sort of woken us up to what's so close and how's the campaign going in general?
Really good, actually. This is the first time, actually in like decades just about, we've got an opportunity now to actually save the old growth forests. But it's always a lot more complex than we ever want it to be. So, you know, we can mobilize our base of environmentalists. In the Victoria area, it's substantial. It's about 25–30%. But this is a bubble. If you look at a lot of British Columbia, you have a lot of working class British Columbia, you've got a lot of recent immigrant communities, and we need to expand. So through that, we've been trying to work to get chambers of commerce, unions, faith groups, and most importantly, working with First Nations who now have logging rights in old growth everywhere. So there's a whole lot of different streams that we're working on that will eventually move the province to move on.
Am I right that at the UBCM conference last year, there was a motion passed on the ancient forests?
Yeah. So
by the entire conference?
This is an amazing thing. So basically the innovation, I think, of Ancient Forest Alliance is knowing that it's not just our base of environmentalists that we need to get on board to really change the outcome of something as grand as this. We needed to work with local governments, starting with Andy McKinnon, who was the former ecologist with the Ministry of Forests, and then became a councillor in Machosen. He got a resolution passed saying, let's end logging of old growth on Vancouver Island. Got that passed at the AVICC, Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. And then across British Columbia at the UBCM, of mayors and city councils across the province saying, let's revise the Vancouver Island land use plan to include forest protection.
Yeah. So also when I first arrived, it was taken for granted that you got, you know, tree huggers over here and chambers of commerce and jobs and loggers over there. And the two just didn't communicate. That's changing, I believe.
And it doesn't change by itself, by the way. It changes because of active efforts, right? So it's literally, all of this is fundamentally driven by our campaign originally with the Port Renfrew Chamber of Commerce, which then garnered support through the Sauk Chamber of Commerce to save old growth, passing a resolution,
Yes.
and then the West Shore Chamber of Commerce, and then the BC Chamber of Commerce.
Really?
This also set the stage for the UBCM eventually to get there as well.
Have you got any stories about building those relationships?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is you know, with environmental movements, but also I think in life in general, it's learning to understand different people and their perspectives, trying to find common ground.
Right.
And over time, you learn from each other.
So that's partly to do with respect.
Yeah, exactly. It's communicating, because often, you know, an early type of environmentalism, I went through it, and most people will go there, start off there is, that's bad. That's bad as well. This is really bad. Stop that. I'm against that. No, I'm against that. That's the initial reaction, and it's a natural one. But if you don't evolve beyond just being against stuff all the time, then you're going to keep your movement small among a tiny group of people who eventually burn out, except the really you know, deranged ones who can be angry all the time, but that's a tiny number of people. So what I learned over time through reflection is, focus on what you're in favor of more than what you're against. Be in favor of solutions. Include other kinds of people who are different than you. Find out your areas of commonality, of businesses who may not think about salamanders and lichens right now, but they might get there. But for now, let's talk about how saving old growth is important for the economies of Port Renfrew, Sauk, who have largely, the logging industry is largely folded in those areas. Let's work with faith groups who may not necessarily share all the same values, but they believe in honoring creation and, you know, being stewards to God's creatures. Let's talk with the outdoor recreation groups. We may not agree on everything, but they know that the deer wintering range is in old growth forests on a lot of Vancouver Island. And they may come around to then the salamanders and lichens, and so this type of thing is and we will learn from them as well. So that's what I've, through a lot of reflection and trial and error, and
so you're sensing this turnaround in not just people's hearts, but in their willingness to get engaged and make a difference, do something.
Yeah, I mean, the younger generations in general are more environmentally sensitive, but not only that, it's through the direct efforts to engage others, forestry workers as well.
So what's needed politically, now that we have a joint NDP Green Alliance, is there more sympathy for protecting all the remaining old growth forest?
It can go there, and it needs to go there, but we still have our work cut out for us. So what it is the Greens already have in their platform, they want to save BC's endangered old growth forests. The NDP have said they want to use the ecosystem-based management model in the Great Bear Rainforest to then manage BC's old growth forests. Now, I'm not sure if they understand what that really means, because if taken literally and directly, if they use the model from the Great Bear, which resulted in 70% of all the forests in the central and north coast being protected based on science, if you transfer that to Vancouver Island, where we only have 25% of the old growth left, it would result in the end to old growth logging here. And that's where we need to go, and we need to log second growth instead. So we want to make sure that they are serious and understand the implications of that platform policy, which is essentially meaning science determines how much needs to be saved so you don't lose biodiversity. Then the government has to hit those targets.
Yeah, in the area where I live, a lot of us live on forest land. I got a 5-acre bit of forest myself, and it's probably logged 60, 80 years ago. So I'm thinking, what do I do to manage this so that in 200 years it returns to becoming old growth?
Yes.
If you just leave it alone long enough and manage it, it will go back to those standards.
And that's what has to happen, because there's a lot of forest types, especially the drier forest types with Douglas fir, and definitely with arbutus and Gary oak in the dry coastal Douglas fir zone, where there's only like literally 1% or 3% of old growth left in these type of zones. And if you want to have old growth there, you actually have to restore the second growth to become old growth. And that's part of good legislation based on science would also include a restoration plan.
So you have volunteers working for you. If people want to get engaged and help you, what's the website they need to go to get in touch?
Well, ancientforestalliance.org.
Right, and they can go there and they can find out and they can call you up. We'll put your phone number on the screen as well, so more volunteers can come out and help this work.
Yeah, there's various things. So we just had actually hundreds of volunteers help build the Avatar Grove boardwalk. So we just finished that a few weeks ago, not very long ago. And then we also have volunteers.
Have you had a formal opening of the boardwalk?
Yeah, so we had a ribbon cutting ceremony.
It's too young to, I shouldn't say that.
No, we had Pachita, a lady who was there along with several people from the business community, and the large diversity of people came out too.
So I asked you to bring a book with you that inspires you. Do you want to show us what you brought here?
Yeah, so this is sort of an interesting book, especially for today's talk. So Big Trees, Not Big Stumps. written by Paul George.
That's a very similar tree on the cover to the one you just shown us, yeah.
Yes, that's right.
And
yeah.
Paul George has worked in this field for years.
Yeah, if you want to know where the modern ancient forest movement came from, where it was largely built from, it was from Paul George, who looks a lot like Grizzly Adams, and, and he founded the Wilderness Committee in 1981, but was out in, I guess, Haida Gwaii, working with the local activists there in Haida Gwaii to save the old growth.
Right. So that's quite the solid read about.
Yeah, like I actually honestly haven't read through everything. But
I've dipped into that as well. It's a really thorough history.
Yeah, amazing level of
and unless
detail.
it's written down, it all gets lost and forgotten.
Yeah, so this goes from basically the late 70s until 2005. It's sort of the foundation for the modern ancient forest movement.
Yeah.
A lot has happened since 2005, but it's an interesting read to know like how much actually happened. That was the environmental movement of the 90s.
Yes.
It was ancient forest. Before it proliferated into fish farms and other stuff, it was largely this.
So we need to wrap up soon. So I want to give you the chance to talk straight to camera and just get inspirational to people, right?
All right.
Camera's over here, right?
Okay, so what I'd like to explain is the importance of old growth forests. We're one of the last jurisdictions on planet Earth that has trees as wide as living rooms, as tall as downtown skyscrapers, and we're also one of the last jurisdictions that still says it's okay to log to the end of our unprotected ancient forests. For a lot of reasons, we need to protect these old growth forests. They're home to a lot of endangered species. There's a whole lot of creatures that can only live in old growth forests. If you convert them to second growth, they will go extinct. Spotted owl, mountain caribou, marbled murrelets. Old growth forests are vital for the climate. They store 2 to 3 times more carbon per hectare than the ensuing second growth plantations. They're fundamental pillars of BC's multi-billion-dollar tourism industry. They provide clean water for human communities, for wild salmon. They're important for First Nations cultures, which evolved in these ancient forests for thousands of years. Big cedars are needed for longhouses, canoes, for all manner of items. And probably the most important reason I believe that ancient forests need to be protected is because more than any other ecosystem, they imbue in humanity a sense of humility. Sort of like walking into a cathedral, you realize you're part of something much bigger and grander than yourself. The whole environmental crisis is essentially people believing they're lords and masters of creation and of ancient forests and of nature in general. So walking into an ancient forest directly and seeing these 1,000-year-old natural cathedrals helps to realize that we're part of a bigger community of life. Something's bigger and greater than us, and that we deserve to live here and to flourish here, along with a tremendous diversity of life. So in that way, protecting ancient forests starts to become a remedy to to humanity's disjunct with nature.
That's great. So really moving from this sense of we're going to dominate to let's respect, restore.
Yes.
Look, 26 years working non-stop for the forest. Look, thank you on behalf of the forest.
Thanks so much for having me.
And all their species for being on the show. This is just great. So my name has been Guy Dauncey. This is the show Change the World. My guest has been Ken Wu from the Ancient Forest Alliance. One of my contributions is this book called Journey to the Future, A Better World is Possible, which is a vision of the future of Vancouver set in the year 2032, when so many of these positive visions are, in my imagination, coming together. If you like this kind of show, tune in next week and we'll guarantee you more. Thanks very much.